Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura, this is Culture Nonsense, and I took a little bit of a break. I might have mentioned in one of my past videos that I started a new job recently and it's been very busy and I've just kind of been very tired, and I keep kind of having ideas for videos, but then, just stuff gets in the way, and once I stopped, it was a little bit hard to get back on the bandwagon. So today I'm talking about yet another scammer. This woman is named Belle Gibson, and I'm sorry to say that I have never heard of her until a couple weeks ago. I know some of you listen to me in Australia, and that's where she's from, and this was a huge story there back in the day, so I'm sorry to my Australian listeners if this is all just repeated news to you, but I think a lot of people in the US don't know who she is. And I heard about her for the first time, like I said, a couple weeks ago on this podcast that I listened to called Maintenance Phase. And I'm going to link a bunch of stuff in the description because I found, a couple documentaries or podcast episodes or interviews that she's done that I think would be really interesting if you would like to know more information after this video is over. So Belle Gibson was a health and wellness influencer type, and she got very popular on Instagram back starting in around 2013, and I believe at her height she had about 200,000 Instagram followers, which today does not sound like that much, but what we're talking about in 2013, that's almost a decade ago. So for that time when Instagram was still relatively new, she was extremely popular, especially in the wellness space, which I think hadn't become quite as overpopulated with the type of healthy guru wellness people like it is today. To give you an idea of this time, I think like Goop was only a couple years old, so we're really starting to kind of pick up the pace on all this wellness stuff, so she kind of hopped on board that train and rode it to fame and popularity. Based on claims that back in 2009, she had had some type of stroke at work and gone into a doctor's office, had gotten a brain scan done, and she found out that she had terminal brain cancer, a tumor, I believe she said. So she was given a prognosis of about 4 months to live, which is very terrifying. She was a young woman at this time. I think she said that she was around 21 years old at this time. I think that tracks with what she said. We'll get to why I'm confused about her age later in the video, just you wait. Anyway, so she was diagnosed with this terminal brain tumor, and a little while later, she found out that she was pregnant. So at this point, she says that she stopped all types of regular treatment, chemo, radiation, because that can be very harmful to a pregnancy. So she decides that instead of treating herself with chemotherapy or radiation, she's going to try to heal herself with food. And so when she kind of becomes popular around 2013, there's this whole narrative built around her that 4 years ago, she was told she had a terminal brain tumor, she had 4 months to live, and now 4 years later, she is living with the same tumor, essentially healing herself and keeping her cancer in check by having a very healthy plant-based diet. Now, this appealed to a lot of people for several reasons. Like I said, during this time, you kind of had the rise in this wellness, plant-based eating ideology. And at the same time, for anyone who has cancer, chemotherapy is a terrible process. You are pumping poison into your body to kill the cancer, but it makes you extremely sick as well, not to mention all of the costs incurred through things like chemo and radiation. So the idea for a lot of people that you could maybe heal yourself through diet instead was very, very appealing. Belle gave a lot of people hope, and she created this community centered around, healthy plant-based eating, keeping a good diet and lifestyle, exercise, all of that, while basically telling people about her health updates through over the year, while also telling people about her health journey over the years, and also kind of sharing experiences with other people who had cancer. So while she was getting more popular, she created this app, which I will say is actually pretty impressive. It was called The Whole Pantry, and it had to do with, I believe mostly, recipes and tips for eating and things like that. The app is now defunct, so you can't really find it. So initially this app was self-funded, and then it was actually picked up by Apple. And I believe at some point in 2014, she was flown to Apple headquarters in California. She was there for this kind of summit. And there was this whole big partnering with Apple because they were about to launch their Apple Watch and they wanted to integrate her app into the watch. So let's say it was a recipe and you were cooking, the instructions could come up on your wrist. So you could just, kind of keep cooking and look at your wrist, which I mean, honestly, again, like I said, good idea. That seems like something that would be helpful to people. As far as I know, the recipes in her book were, pretty good, pretty healthy. It's kind of hard to go wrong with plant-based eating. However, as a whole, I know a lot of people who did follow this diet were not eating enough, or were not eating enough in combination with exercising too much, or they weren't getting enough carbohydrates. And every body is different. Some people need more than others. So it's pretty hard when you're trying to follow this cookie cutter template for what's healthy and it's negatively affecting your body, but you're just telling yourself that it's because you're doing something wrong, you're not following the plan, and then you double down on whatever you're doing that's actually causing you to be unhealthy in the first place. And later on in the video, I will talk about a couple people who followed this routine and actually did become unwell because they were, depriving themselves of nutrients or things that their body needed. So after the success of the Whole Pantry app, Belle is still riding the fame and media high. I believe she had articles done in Elle and Cosmopolitan. Like I said, there was this collaboration with Apple, and then Penguin in Australia picked up the Whole Pantry to basically collaborate with Belle and create a recipe book. So she's getting all this publicity. The recipe book comes out, and shortly after this, things start to take a little bit of a turn. Now, with Belle being still wildly popular, she posts to her group and shares that she has had a very bad doctor's visit, and actually there is more cancer found in her body. She said that she had test results and found that the cancer spread to her spleen, liver, uterus, and blood. So it sounds like a very bad prognosis. Now, during this time, there had been some other journalists who were interested in having an interview with Belle. Like I said, she was getting very popular, and then she drops this new kind of hard to believe health claim, especially because if you look at Belle, she's a young woman, she appears healthy, she still has her hair because she's not doing chemo, but she just doesn't look or act like a person who has cancer, and it set off a lot of alarm bells for people. So one of these was a journalist for the newspaper, The Australian in Australia, and he had been following the wellness beat since around 2012, and I believe at one point his wife had had cancer. So through personal experiences, he knew that what Belle was saying in different interviews and just the way she was living her life did not square with someone who had such a severe case of cancer that had now spread to multiple different organs. When he started doing some digging, the story got even more complicated. For one thing, Belle didn't seem to have much of a digital footprint before, 2013, 2014. And he just found that to be very, very odd. You're trying to look up this person who became popular around this time, and there's just nothing beforehand. So he kept going, kept digging, and found from several years earlier a very different type of Belle. So this woman was on kind of skater forums. She looked very different from the Belle Gibson that people knew at this time. Naturally, she has very dark hair, so this was before she dyed her hair blonde. And one thing that tied these two Belles together was one post where this teenager skater Belle was talking about having a tattoo done, and the tattoo matched the tattoo that the current Belle has. Now, the weird thing, and why he originally thought these might be two different people, was that they were 3 years apart in age. So after making the connection that, yes, in fact, this was the same woman, he found out that Belle had been lying about her age and that, in fact, she was 3 years younger than everyone thought initially. So when she was supposedly diagnosed with her terminal brain tumor, she would have been 17 years old, not 20. Another weird thing about this Belle is that she posted, back when she was a teenager, several other weird health claims, supposedly, several days in a row being in the hospital and talking about how she had to have open heart surgery and she died on the table, and maybe there was another stroke in there at this point, I can't remember. But there were these crazy claims about operations that she had and medical things she was going through. Like I said, the whole dying on the table thing for a couple minutes. And we all know that this is categorically false because, number one, just very basic, Belle Gibson does not have any scars from any type of open heart surgery. And later on, when people looked into her medical records and she shared them eventually, there was no evidence of any of this going on. So all of this is being found out. And meanwhile, this journalist was, just trying to get background on Belle while he was trying to get an interview with her. So when he does eventually get an interview, it does not prove extremely fruitful in trying to find out any information. And this is because Belle is a very difficult person to interview. She talks in circles a lot, is not very clear with things, backtracks, changes narratives. If you ever try to, drill down on something and pin her to a certain point, she'll kind of dance away from it. And it's just very difficult to get a straight answer out of her. And sometimes her story changes from day to day, depending on who she's talking to, or she might say that her memory is very bad because of the medication that she's taking. One piece of information this journalist did get out of his interview with Belle Gibson was that she at this point was no longer sure of her diagnosis from the most recent doctor, who said that she now had cancer spreading to all these different organs. And he asked her, so do you think you have this additional cancer? And she said no, which is very weird because at this point she'd pretty much been telling everyone that she had all this other cancer. She may have realized this was some kind of mistake because a couple days after the interview, or sometime after the interview, she called the reporter and was talking to him about, the damaging effects of the stories, and in a rather circuitous way talked about how some people who might be fragile or vulnerable, might kill themselves if something of this nature was so damaging to come out in the media. So not necessarily a threat, but letting the reporter know that, whatever you come out with, this could be seriously damaging to me and I might do something dangerous because of that. So I have no idea to the extent of which she was telling him her true feelings or trying to get him not to come forward with this story. But whatever the case, it was, a very disturbing call to the reporter. So while this reporter, Richard Gilliatt, I believe his name is, and I apologize, I realized up until this point I hadn't said his name. While he was figuring all this about Belle, some other reporters were also sniffing around things as well, because like I said, at this point she'd gotten to the level of fame where some things just didn't make sense with what she was saying. So a couple other reporters, namely Bo Donnelly and Nick Toscano from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, were also working on stories about Belle. I believe it was either them or some other journalists who found out some background on Belle, like she'd claimed that she'd left home when she was 12 and lived with friends until she was 15 when she dropped out of high school. I believe she was from a suburb of Brisbane, Australia, and she moved to Melbourne. Allegedly, a lot of people from her inside circle were also talking on background, saying that they believed she might not actually be sick. The thing about those claims, though, is that they're very hard to prove without any actual medical records. So these reporters started to look at things from a different angle, namely financials, which could be better proven. One thing that also made people really like Belle was that she talked a lot about charity and giving back, and a portion of every app sale for the whole pantry was supposed to go to a charity. Now, she quoted a couple charities, like ones that were helping children with cancer or maybe schools in Sierra Leone. So different charities that Belle Gibson was a fan of. Your purchase for the whole pantry was supposed to be donating in part to charities like these. Now, what reporters found out when they looked into this was that Belle Gibson was not donating to charities. And in fact, I think 4 out of 5 charities that they contacted did not even know this promise was made, had not heard of Belle Gibson, did not have any idea what they were talking about or that any donation was supposed to be coming their way. And one of the charities contacted said, yes, Belle Gibson did give me a donation. And they said, oh, really, when? And I guess she had donated $1,000 literally the day before because she had gotten wind that, some people were sniffing around asking about charities. So she just donated some money really fast to try to at least, get something out the door and say that she donated to someone at some point. So when these stories came out about the potential false health claims and the lack of donations to charity, it opened the proverbial floodgates to anyone and everyone who might have had anything bad to say about Belle, any inklings that she was not who she said she was, and people turned on her swiftly. The retribution was fast. Now, of course, she came out with a statement saying that there were problems with the donations to charity because they were a young business, essentially blamed accounting issues and things like that, just saying that there were details and things were gummed up in the works and it wasn't really her fault, but they were trying to get these donations out, just hadn't happened yet. Now, of course, no one believed this because it just wasn't true. Sensing that there was no way to really make this better, in April 2015, Belle sat down for an interview with the Australian Women's Weekly and admitted that she had never had cancer. Within a couple weeks, her publisher dropped her book, which was set to be published in the US and the UK in addition to Australia, and Apple severed all ties with her. I think at this point, the backlash had gotten so bad they didn't want any part of it. But actually, initially, when one of these journalists contacted Apple about this, they pretty much said that they didn't care that the health claims were false as long as the app worked. Although I guess at a certain point, that position kind of became untenable when she became such a hated figure. I still just can't believe she never had cancer. I mean, how did she think this was going to go? I think this is just a very disturbed woman who was not thinking long term whatsoever. And actually, the funny thing is, when I first heard about this story, like I said, I had no idea who she was. And the story was told in such a way that you didn't find out she never had cancer until, 2/3 of the way through. So it was just ridiculous hearing this story about this woman and then realizing it was all just completely made up. And so in a very tiny way, there was a little bit of maybe what some of her followers felt, but I cannot imagine the sense of personal betrayal that they all felt. This person they looked up to, that was a great inspiration for them, or anyone that they knew who was sick or trying to be healthy, was a complete fraud. And that she was using cancer just to become famous and get money. So a few months after this scandal broke, Belle went on Australia's 60 Minutes and gave an interview, which I will also link below. It's a little bit over a half hour long, and I think you should watch it for a couple of reasons. Let me just say that it was very confusing and frustrating listening to Belle in this interview. I'll give you a little bit of a reenactment when, the simple question of how old are you was asked. You're 23, right? Well, actually, how old are you? I've always been raised as currently being a 26-year-old. Just listen.
You're 23, right? Well, actually, how old are you?
I've always been raised as being currently a 26-year-old.
How old are you?
Well, I live knowing, as I've always known, that I would be 26.
Okay, Bill.
I've
This is a really, really simple question. How old are you?
I believe that I'm 26.
And?
I have two birth certificates and I've had my name changed 4 times. The identity crisis there is big, but that was my normal when I was growing up, Tara. That
What do you know the truth to be now?
that's probably a question that we'll have to keep digging for, because it's not something I've ever understood or had answers around.
Yeah. Girl don't even know how old she is. In this interview, Belle tries to defend herself a lot by saying that she went to some pretty much like quackpot doctors who at the time tested this weird German technology on her that was all about frequencies or something, and they told her she had cancer, and it wasn't through a traditional hospital, even though every time she was writing about it, she acted as if she were going to a normal hospital. So she said that she had doubts about having cancer relatively early on and then just didn't share those with anyone for, some reason. I think that this interview sheds a lot of light on the fact that Belle's grip to reality is tenuous at best. I mean, she can't even answer a question about how old she is. I have no right to diagnose anyone, but she seems to be displaying some traits of a pathological liar. I don't even know if she realizes all the time that she's not telling the truth because she seems to believe it. And apparently, when people got in contact with her mother as well, she also expressed some of these traits. So, to some degree, it may be hereditary. It may be the environment that she grew up around with her mom. Who knows? All we know is that she just seems incapable of telling the whole truth. What's especially difficult for me to believe is that Belle reached such heights without anyone really doing any fact checking about her. Like I said, she had magazine articles, an app, a book, and no one did any fact checking. And in fact, someone reached out to Cosmopolitan magazine after a feature was run on Belle, and they wrote this letter and they said, you don't know me, but I have reason to believe that the woman in this article was, this person I went to high school with. This is where we went. This is the year graduation was. She was in my class, and you could never believe her about anything. This woman lies about absolutely everything, and I would urge you to look into her story closer because she may be lying again. And Cosmopolitan did nothing about it until, of course, all of this information broke. And then for some reason, they revealed the fact that they had gotten this letter, which just to me, I would have kept that secret because it just looks bad for them that they got this information and then did nothing about it and it turned out to be true. In regards to better vetting, Consumer Affairs Victoria recommended that Penguin must enhance its compliance education and training program with a specific focus on ensuring all claims about medical conditions are substantiated and that statements about natural therapies are accompanied by a prominent warning notice. And Penguin, they even went one step further because they did media training with Belle, and I think some of them realized that her story just didn't add up. And again, at this point, the publishing was already in the works. It would have been a big financial loss for them to just shut everything down. So in a way, by giving her this media training, they kind of helped cover up her lies in a way. All of this did come out. Penguin did make a $30,000 donation to the Victorian Consumer Law Fund, but honestly, it's just not enough. They just didn't do their jobs. Additionally, because of all of the false charitable claims that Belle made, she was taken to court in 2017 and pled guilty to misleading and deceptive conduct and was fined 410,000 Australian dollars or around $300,000 in US dollars. However, she actually failed to pay any of these fines, and in January 2020, her home was actually raided by the Victoria Sheriff's Office in order to try to recoup some funds by, just repossessing some of her things. One thing that I mentioned earlier that's very distressing about this whole story is all of the people who were duped by Belle and followed her advice, and that may have been to their own detriment and could have severely affected their health. There are some people who, in addition to just trying to eat healthier, went off of their medication because, like I said, chemotherapy is very hard. And if you think there's another way, some people want to find that other way. We have no idea how many people might have been influenced by Belle, but several people were very angry and disgusted by her conduct because it could have affected the lives of so many people who thought this was a way that they could be healthy. And in fact, it might have ended up causing them even more harm, especially if they went off treatments and their cancer spread or they could have died. One thing that I thought was interesting is that last year the BBC came out with a short, about 45-minute documentary about this called Bad Influencer, which I will also link below to, I believe, a bootleg copy on YouTube, but it was the only place where I could find to watch it. But what was interesting about this documentary is that along with telling the Belle Gibson story, it also followed 3 people who were her fans and who took her advice, and how a lot of them really had trouble following this kind of wellness eating advice. One woman, like I said, thought she was being very healthy when in fact she was depriving her body of things it needed, and she lost her period for a time. There was another woman who did have cancer who, luckily, I don't believe, didn't stop all of her treatments, but, was not understanding why there was this woman like Belle who could be the picture of health and not being doing chemo at all. And then her, I think this woman's name was Kylie, who was really struggling. And, thank goodness she didn't just stop everything and try to do what Belle was doing, because that would have been so much worse for her. It's fun and ridiculous to look at the story and all of the twists and turns and the lies upon lies. There's something very satisfying about seeing a scammer and a fraudulent person being brought to light, but I don't want to diminish the real harm that Belle Gibson did. Through social media, we have a lot of parasocial relationships where we can feel a huge attachment to someone who's on the other end of the screen, even if we don't know them. And for reasons like this, they get more influence over our lives, why they're called influencers. And Belle used this influence in a way that was very, very harmful to people, basically just for her own gain and profit. I honestly cannot believe that I hadn't heard of her before a couple weeks ago. And like I said before, sorry to everyone who's known about this for a while. I just jumping on the bandwagon way too late. But if you are like me and had no idea about who this person was and you want to know more, check out a bunch of the articles or, like I said, videos and podcasts that I link down below. Especially the maintenance phase one is pretty funny, I will say. Let me know how you think Belle Gibson stacks up against Elizabeth Holmes maybe in the comments below, which one is worse. And also, speaking of Elizabeth Holmes, I will be watching The Dropout on Hulu, so maybe I'll make a video about that and my thoughts. If you're still here, thank you for watching to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. I hope you all are having a great day, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!